My grandfather raised his glass at my 28th birthday dinner and said something that split the room wide open. "Claire, why don't you tell us all how you've spent your $3 million trust fund over the past 25 years? The laughter died instantly. Every fork stopped moving. Even the candlelight seemed to freeze in place. I could hear my own heartbeat hammering in my ears as I whispered the only truth I knew. I never got one. Grandpa's smile vanished. His attorney stepped forward and dropped a heavy stack of financial statements right in the center of the table with a thud that shook the silverware. And in that split second, before a single word was spoken, I noticed something. Someone at that table was terrified, and they had every reason to be. My name is Claire Monroe, and for most of my life I believed that staying quiet made everything easier. Quiet daughters don't stir the pot, quiet daughters don't rock the boat, and in my family, keeping the boat steady meant pretending everything was picture perfect, even when the whole thing was rotting from the inside out. I lived in a tiny apartment in Seattle with my roommate, Jade. She worked at the coffee shop down the block and always came home smelling like espresso and cinnamon. Jade was the only person on this earth who ever saw how hard I really worked, hunched over my laptop at 2 a.m, grinding through freelance UX design contracts just to keep the lights on. The work came and went like the weather. She liked to joke that I ran on caffeine and pure stubbornness, but she knew the real story. I had nobody to catch me if I fell. My parents, Elaine and Daniel, lived across the lake in Bellevue, in one of those houses people slow down to stare at. Flawless lawn, seasonal wreath on the door, holiday decorations straight out of a magazine. And inside, a mother who lived and breathed control and appearances, a father who spent his whole life nodding along just to keep the peace, and my sister Lily, sweet, bubbly Lily, who somehow glided through life wrapped in a blanket of my parents' love and their money. Growing up, Lily got everything, the vacations, the private school, the apartment they paid for so she could focus on herself. Me? I was told that struggle builds character. When I needed a co-signer on my first lease because I didn't have enough credit history, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "We can't keep bailing you out, Claire." Every time, like there had ever been a first time. But I kept showing up. Every holiday, every birthday, every awkward family dinner. I kept trying because some stubborn little piece of me refused to let go. And maybe, just maybe, it was because of Grandpa Arthur. He was the one soft place in my whole childhood. Warm hands, patient voice, a quiet, steady kind of love that never asked me to perform. When I was 6 years old, he walked me along the shoreline near the family house, and he said something I carried with me for the rest of my life. "One day, Claire, I'm going to make sure you're safe, no matter what happens." I held on to that memory like a lifeline. I just didn't realize until much later that it was also a clue. My 28th birthday dinner was supposed to be elegant, low-key but polished, at least that's how my mother described it. The restaurant had set aside a private dining room for us. Warm amber lighting, crisp white tablecloths, glassware lined up like something out of a catalog spread. The whole thing felt staged, kind of like those family portraits we took every Thanksgiving. Stiff, curated, not quite real. I showed up straight from work, still wearing my trench coat, my hair a little wild from the Seattle wind. My mother gave me a quick once-over, then turned and smoothed Lily's hair instead. Lily smiled at me, bright, easy, completely oblivious to the tension humming underneath everything. Dinner unfolded the way it always did. Lily dominated the conversation with stories about her latest adventure. My mother glowed with pride. My father sipped his wine in silence. And Grandpa just watched. He watched all of us with this look on his face I couldn't quite decode. I sat there with my back straight and my eyes on my plate, cutting my food into neat little pieces instead of looking at anyone's face. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that he'd been waiting for exactly the right moment. Waiting to light a match under 25 years of lies. If you'd asked me an hour before everything blew up whether I'd noticed anything unusual, I would have said no. It all looked painfully normal. Mom adjusting Lily's posture, Dad pretending to study the wine label, Lily laughing too loudly at her own stories. But something had been shifting beneath the surface for months. I'd felt it, low and constant, like a hum vibrating through my bones. The jabs started early, the way they always did. My mother made a comment about how resourceful I'd become, said it in that particular tone she used when she wanted everyone at the table to understand that my life was the result of bad decisions, not bad luck. "Claire's always been independent," she announced, flashing a smile at the couple seated nearby. "She never really needed much from us." She said it like a compliment. It landed like a slap. Across the table, Lily twisted a gold bracelet around her wrist. Delicate, expensive, the kind of thing I'd never been given. She launched into a story about some weekend getaway our parents had bankrolled. Dad chuckled and said, "She deserves it. She's been working so hard." I almost choked. Lily hadn't been in school for months. I pushed my food around my plate and told myself to breathe. But the memories came crawling up anyway. Uninvited, sharp-edged, impossible to ignore. The night my car broke down on the highway, and I called my mother in a panic because I needed it to get to work the next morning. "You're an adult, Claire," she'd said, flat as a board. "Figure it out." I spent that night on hold with tow companies and maxed out a credit card I was still paying off years later, the semester in college when I couldn't afford textbooks, and begged, if they could help cover even part of the cost. "We can't keep bailing you out," she'd told me. "It's not fair to Lily." Meanwhile, Lily's European class trip had been paid for before she'd even started packing. Sitting at that birthday table, those memories didn't just float to the surface. They stitched themselves together into a pattern I'd been too afraid to see. Grandpa watched me the whole time, quietly, carefully, while everyone else talked over each other. He always knew when something was wrong with me, even when I tried my hardest to hide it. When the server came around to top off our glasses and the conversation dipped into a momentary lull, Grandpa lifted his wine, and then he did it. "Claire," he said, his voice gentle but deliberate, "why don't you tell everyone how you've used your $3 million trust fund over the past 25 years? The reaction hit like a lightning strike. Sharp, startled laughter burst from around the table. Lily giggled, clearly thinking it was a joke. My mother's face cycled through 3 expressions in under a second: confusion, panic, and then that stiff plastic smile she wore like armor. My father set his glass down so hard it cracked against the table. I went cold. Not shivering cold. The kind of cold that empties you out from the inside, like someone pulled the plug on everything warm you ever felt. "What trust fund?" I asked. Grandpa's smile disappeared. "The one I set up for you when you were 3. My throat locked up. When the words finally came, they barely made a sound. I never got one. The silence that followed wasn't just silence. It was suffocating. Lily's grin crumbled. My father's jaw went tight. My mother stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. And in that awful, frozen moment, I understood. The truth hadn't just been kept from me. Someone had stolen it. The dinner didn't end after that. It shattered. 1 second, everyone was locked in place like statues. The next, chairs were scraping, voices were climbing over each other, and the room suddenly felt way too small to hold all the lies that were spilling into the open air. My mother recovered first, because of course she did. Her smile clicked back into position so fast it looked almost painful. "Dad," she said, her voice dripping with that sugary, razor-sharp sweetness she'd perfected over the years. "I'm sure Claire misunderstood. She's always been a little distracted. You know how she is." Distracted. Like I'd somehow daydreamed my way through 28 years of scraping by alone. My father cleared his throat and stared at his plate like it held the answers to the universe. Lily blinked over and over, trying to make sense of something she'd never even known existed. But Grandpa didn't look at any of them. He looked straight at me. "Claire," he said, quiet and steady. "Meet me tomorrow morning, my office, 10 o'clock. It wasn't a request, and every single person at that table knew it. I got up and walked out before anyone could try to stop me. The cold Bellevue air hit me square in the chest the second I stepped outside, but I kept walking, down the sidewalk, past the warm, glowing windows of other restaurants, past strangers laughing and clinking glasses and celebrating things I couldn't imagine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked, replaying the same 5 words over and over in my head, the ones I'd whispered like a confession. I never got one. By the time I made it to my car, my hands were trembling. My phone buzzed. It was Jade. "How was dinner?" she asked. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. The silence said everything. "Come home," she said softly. "Whatever happened, we'll figure it out." But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't the kind of thing you just figure out. This had been buried on purpose, carefully, deliberately, for a very long time. The next morning, I caught the early bus downtown. Seattle was still half asleep, fog curling along the sidewalks, streetlights winking out one by one. Grandpa's office sat on one of the upper floors of a sleek glass tower. It was quiet up there, warm, and it smelled faintly of cedar and old leather-bound books. He was waiting for me in a chair by the window, a folder balanced on his knee. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was disappointment. Deep, heavy, and aimed at someone who wasn't me. "I set up a trust fund for you when you were 3 years old," he said. $3 million. It was supposed to keep you safe, give you choices, make sure you never had to struggle. He paused. "You were supposed to have full access the day you turned 18. My stomach dropped. 18. I'd spent that birthday bagging groceries. Why didn't I know? My voice cracked down the middle. Why didn't they tell me? Grandpa handed me the folder without a word. Inside was a preliminary audit, page after page of withdrawals, transfers, and payments, most of them recurring, many of them suspicious. Every single one of them signed off by the same two names, Elaine Monroe, Daniel Monroe. My parents hadn't just hidden the trust fund from me, they'd been draining it, for 25 years. Mortgage payments, home renovations, Lily's tuition, Lily's apartment, vacations, car payments, credit card bills, designer purchases. Every single thing that had always been too expensive when it came to me, they'd been funding it with my money. The anger hit me like a wall of heat, rising up behind my ribs and wrapping itself around my throat. Anger, grief, humiliation, and underneath all of it, a terrible, sickening clarity. Every double shift I'd worked, every time I'd swallowed my pride and begged for help, every time I told myself I just wasn't the kind of daughter people invested in, none of it had been fate. It had been theft. Grandpa leaned forward. "Claire," he said, "I've already hired a legal team. My attorney Collins is going to run a full forensic audit. But I need you to tell me, how far do you want to take this?" I stared down at the pages, at the neat little signatures of the two people who were supposed to love me more than anyone else in this world. "I want everything," I said. "Every record, every receipt, every dollar. I want the truth, all of it." Grandpa nodded once, slow, firm. "Then we'll bring them in for a meeting." "I want to be there," I said. "You will be," he promised. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the quiet daughter. I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the one walking straight toward the fire. And this time, I wasn't the one who was going to get burned. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon, one of those bitter Seattle days where the sky looks like hammered steel and the air sits so heavy in your lungs it feels like you're breathing through wet cloth. Grandpa insisted the whole thing take place in a private conference room inside his building. Neutral territory, he called it. But I knew the real reason. He wanted every single second of what was about to go down to be documented, witnessed, and completely inescapable. I got there early. My palms were damp despite the cold, but my steps didn't falter. Not once. Jade had wrapped me in a hug before I walked out of the apartment that morning. She'd looked me up and down and said I looked like someone walking into both a courtroom and a resurrection at the same time. I didn't fully understand what she meant until I caught my own reflection in the elevator doors on the way up. My back was straight, my face was still, and my eyes had something in them I had never seen before. Resolve. When the elevator opened, Collins was already standing there waiting. Grandpa's attorney looked exactly the way he had the first time I'd met him. Silver hair combed neatly to the side, tailored suit without a single wrinkle, and a thick stack of documents tucked under his arm like a loaded weapon. He gave me a short nod, the kind that told me he'd already sized up my emotional state and decided I could handle what was coming. "They're on their way," he said. I didn't bother asking who he meant. We both already knew. Inside the conference room, Grandpa was seated at the head of a long wooden table. His expression was unreadable, but the tension locked in his jaw told me he'd barely slept. When he saw me walk in, his face softened, just barely, just for a second. But it was enough. He reached over, took my hand, gave it one firm squeeze and let go. "You're not alone today," he said. The door swung open behind me. My parents came in first. My mother moved quickly, shoulders pulled back, chin high, her face arranged into that familiar mask she always wore when she needed the world to believe she was blameless. My father trailed behind her, quieter, his eyes scanning the room like he was looking for the nearest exit. And then came Lily, clutching her handbag against her chest, her face twisted into something caught between worry and total disbelief. She'd been told there was a family matter that needed to be addressed. Nobody had told her she was part of the problem. "Dad," my mother started, her voice already sharp. "I have no idea what this is about, but dragging us into some kind of formal—" Grandpa held up one hand. "Sit." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. They sat. Collins closed the door behind them. Then he walked to the center of the room, lifted that thick stack of financial statements, and placed them on the table. The sound, a heavy, deliberate thud, bounced off the walls like a gavel strike. Lily flinched. My father swallowed so hard I could see his throat move from across the room. My mother's eyes went wide. "Those are your signatures," Collins said, his voice flat and measured. 25 years' worth of withdrawals, transfers, and payments, all pulled directly from a trust fund that was established solely for the benefit of Claire Monroe. Nobody breathed. Then Collins started reading. Year 1, mortgage payments. He turned the page. Year 2, home repairs, kitchen remodel. Another page. Tuition payments, not for Claire, vehicle expenses, travel, credit card balances, monthly rent on an apartment leased to Lily Monroe. Every word that came out of his mouth peeled back another layer, and with each one, something deep inside me began to unfold. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even rage. Not anymore. It was clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when you've been staring at shadows your whole life and someone finally turns on the lights. My mother's face went white. This is being taken completely out of context. Collins didn't even blink. The context, ma'am, is financial abuse of a named beneficiary. The audit has been completed. I looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who had spent my entire childhood telling people I was too sensitive. She wasn't talking to me. She wasn't apologizing. She wasn't even trying to explain. She was doing what she always did, fighting to protect her image. My father finally opened his mouth. His voice was thin, almost hollow. We used the money for the family. It wasn't personal. The laugh left me before I could catch it. Not personal. My hands were shaking, but I kept my voice low and steady. When my car broke down on the highway and I called you begging for help, that wasn't personal. When I almost had to drop out of college because I couldn't afford textbooks, that was your version of family? He flinched like I'd reached across the table and hit him. My mother straightened up, lifting her chin the way she always did when she was cornered. Claire, we always intended to put the money back. When? I cut her off. When I turned 40? 50? Or were you just never going to bother? Grandpa leaned forward in his chair, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. You stole from a child. Her throat moved. Dad, we had bills. Everybody has bills, he said, but not everybody robs their own daughter to pay them. Then Lily spoke. Her voice was small, fractured, barely holding together. Mom, Dad, you used her money for my apartment, for my school? Sweetheart, my mother said, her voice trembling now. We just wanted you to have every opportunity, and I didn't, I whispered. My mother turned to me. Her eyes were glassy, not with guilt, but with panic. The kind of panic that comes when you realize the walls are closing in and there's no story left to spin. Claire, you've always been so independent. You never asked for much. I leaned in closer. I didn't ask because you taught me not to. Because every single time I came to you needing something, anything, you made me feel like I was a burden for even bringing it up. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full to bursting, packed with every lie, every excuse, every unspoken truth they'd been running from for a quarter of a century. Grandpa placed his hand flat on the table. One firm tap. "I am revoking your financial authority, effective immediately." My mother jerked in her seat. "You can't do that." "I can," he said, cold, final. "And I already have." My father sank into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him up. 25 years of pretending, and it all just collapsed right there in that room. Lily sat frozen, both hands pressed over her mouth, staring at the table like it might swallow her whole. Collins slid a new set of documents across the table toward me. "This paperwork transfers full control of all remaining trust assets into your name. Your parents' access has been permanently terminated." My mother's breath caught. My father closed his eyes. Lily whispered, "Oh my God." I looked down at the pen in front of me. My hand hovered over the signature line, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just signing a legal document. I was signing the truth, the one that had been stolen from me before I was old enough to even understand what it meant. I pressed my name into the page. My mother shoved her chair back so hard it scraped across the floor like a scream. "Claire, please, this will ruin us." I looked up at her, and for the first time in my life I saw her clearly. Not as my mother, not as the woman I'd spent decades trying to earn love from. I saw her for exactly what she was, someone who had built her entire life on a foundation that was never hers. "Then maybe," I said, "you shouldn't have built your life on money that didn't belong to you." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her legs buckled. My father reached out to catch her arm, but his own hand was shaking too badly to hold steady. They practically crumbled right there in front of me. And for the first time, the very first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet daughter holding everything together so everyone else could stay comfortable. I was the one pulling down the curtain. I was the one dismantling the lie they'd spent 25 years building. And I didn't look away. When the meeting ended, the room felt stripped bare, like someone had taken a blade to every wall and scraped off every last layer of pretense until there was nothing left to hide behind. My parents walked out first. My mother was trembling from head to toe, my father steering her forward with a hand that could barely hold itself still. Neither of them looked back. Lily stayed behind. She stood near the door, staring at me with this look, part guilt, part grief, and something underneath it all that almost resembled an apology. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again, and finally, in a voice so small it barely carried across the room, she said, "I didn't know, Claire." I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't there yet. But it wasn't anger either. It was something quieter than both. It was a beginning. Over the weeks that followed, everything changed. Collins finalized the legal transfers. Every remaining asset in the trust was locked down in my name and my name alone. My parents received formal notification that any attempt to interfere, contest, or conceal further misuse would result in civil action. For the first time in their lives, they had to sit with the full weight of what they'd done. No shield, no story, no one left to blame. Grandpa came to see me at my new place, a modest condo in Seattle. Nothing fancy, but it was mine in a way that no space had ever been before. He walked through the rooms slowly, running his hand along the walls, taking it all in with this quiet, proud little smile. "You deserve this," he said. "You deserved it all along." I didn't tell him that I'd cried myself to sleep the first night I spent there. Not out of sadness, not entirely. It was something more complicated than that. Half grief, half relief. Grief for the family I never really had. Relief for the life I was finally free to build. I started spending more time down at the park by the water. I'd sit on a bench and let the cold winter air wash over me, clearing out whatever ache was still hanging on. I wasn't healed. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. But I wasn't drowning anymore. And for the first time in my life, the silence around me didn't feel like something that had been taken from me. It felt like something that belonged to me. In the weeks and months that followed, I kept coming back to something Grandpa told me when I was a little girl, that safety isn't just about being protected. It's about knowing who's going to be standing next to you when the truth finally comes out. I understand that now. Fully, completely. Family isn't about blood. It's not about sharing a last name or showing up to the same Thanksgiving table every year. Family is about honesty. It's about accountability. It's about the people who don't disappear the moment the truth becomes inconvenient. I don't hate my parents. Honestly, I don't think I ever will. But I've learned something that took me 28 years to figure out, that sometimes walking away from someone isn't an act of cruelty. It's an act of love. Love for yourself. Love for the life you're finally allowed to have. Love for the peace you've decided you're never going to hand over again. And if you've ever been in that place, if you've ever had to step back from the people who were supposed to take care of you, the people who should have loved you the loudest, I want you to hear me when I say this. You are not alone. Your story matters. Your boundaries matter. And you are allowed to choose yourself, even if nobody else ever did.